Today we've got another team that is back in the lottery for once again. You can just say once again. Don't remember exactly how many years in a row it's been, but Portland has been in the lottery for the last few seasons at least and has been able to add a lot of talent. It is another team that has a lot of different pieces to try and make things fit. They have a number of different guys with loads of upside. They have solid veteran players that could help them compete now and for different stretches made them look like a competitive team, but they're back in the lottery. They did make a little bit of a push for the playoffs right there, but then they just weren't able to get it done. The West is really tough. The fact that they were kind of had a chance to get in there at the end says a little bit about their development, but we're still waiting for them to make that leap. It's been a number of years in a row where they've basically, I mean, they didn't do it quite as early this time, as they didn't tank as hard as early, but they still did end up pulling the plug on their season and focus on development. We need some of these guys to take a step forward to have any reason to be optimistic. And some of them did. Some of them showed some great progress, others, but they're still missing that franchise player. Is he on this roster? Maybe, could be, but not necessarily. But we'll dive into things here. But just before we do that, I want to remind you guys that, oh goodness, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. We've got baseball season going on. We've got the NBA and NHL playoffs, of course. Tonight we are starting a new series, and then also having game 2 of another one. The Pacers and Cavs. Pacers stole game 1. Now, as of the time I'm recording this, DeAndre Hunter and Evan Mobley are questionable. Darius Garland's questionable. Cleveland's favored by 9 points. That's a pretty hefty line there. A lot in their favor. I get it. They lost game 1. Everyone's expecting them to respond, but if they don't have some of these players, things could get messy quickly. So it's an interesting line. And then we'll also have game 1 of the Timberwolves and Warriors. Both teams upset their round 1 matchup, with Golden State taking down the Rockets in 7 games and Minnesota beating the Lakers in 5. Minnesota will be coming off a little bit more rest and be the home team because the 6th seed gets home court advantage over the 7th seed. And they're favored by 7 for game 1. So some very interesting lines you can check out on BetOnline. Then in between some of those games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, let's talk about Portland. Let's talk about the Trailblazers. And let's kind of look at what they're working with here. So this draft, which the lottery will be about a week from now, and then we'll have a better indication of where they'll pick. But right now they have the 10th best odds at the number 1 pick. As far as who they're returning for next year, it's going to look like a pretty similar roster. Not too much they're going to lose out on. Matisse Thybulle has a player option. He could opt out. Don't know if he would or wouldn't. He's had a lot of injuries recently, so I don't know if a team would offer him more than an $11.5 million contract. So he may just opt in and want to stick around and make that, and then be a free agent the next summer. Maybe try and have a bounce back year to earn even more money. Delano Banton's an unrestricted free agent. We've got Jabari Walker as a restricted free agent, as well as Bryce McGowan's and Justin Minaya. And then Ryan Repair, I believe this is saying that, yeah, he's a team option for this year. I would assume they pick it up. No reason not. Young guy with some upside. But pretty much everyone else is going to be back unless they make some trades. They're just in such an interesting situation because, like I said, they have a lot of different players that are exciting, young, have upside. They have a couple of different, you can call them veterans or like slightly like young veterans that can contribute but have definitely had question marks, which is why they haven't been traded yet. And it's why that I guess Portland isn't too worried about them sticking around. It's not like they're so good that it's going to interrupt the process of adding lottery talent, but they're competitive enough to make this team competitive. I don't know. It's a very interesting balance. The guys that fit that mold that I could see as trade targets for other teams, but they may or may not want to. DeAndre Ayton, who's former number 1 overall pick, incredibly talented. going to earn $35.5 million next year. But there's been questions about, I guess, him as a player, him as a defender, as a core center. Like, we know he's an incredible offensive talent, but is he the missing piece for another team, for a championship team? And what is the price for him? Because he was basically run out of town in Phoenix. Does another team believe in him enough to try and trade for him? And we'll get into more of these guys. I'm just kind of highlighting here at first. Jeremy Grant, hasn't played a basketball game in April since like 2021 or something like that. Maybe even, I don't remember the exact date, but he just gets shut down at the end of season a lot. He's a talented player. That's why he has a big contract, because he's earned it from being a good scorer. But a lot of question marks about how he'd fit when trying to help a team win. So maybe he's content to just sit there and earn his contract and isn't too worried about winning, which is why he's happy where he is. Is a team interested in trading for a player like that that's now 30 years old? I don't know. Anthony Simons, I think, is probably the most attractive trade target. 25 years old, going to make a little under $28 million next year, which is the last year of his contract. There are a number of teams that could use him. The defensive question marks are probably going to be there and probably going to be exposed a little bit more outside of Portland on a team that would be trying to win a championship or make the playoffs. Might be a little bit more of an issue, but the offensive talent is very real. The shot creation, the shooting, very real, and would definitely help a team. I think Orlando would be a great fit for him. We'll see if that ends up happening. Robert Williams, we know what he can be when he's healthy, but we also know that he's not healthy very often. Makes him a difficult player for a team to want to invest assets in trading for. And then you have some of the younger guys that are probably more considered part of this core. Denny Avdia had an excellent year this past season, first in Portland, especially kind of the second half post All-Star break. He was phenomenal. And then you have Scoot Henderson, Donovan Kling, and Shaden Sharp, the recent lottery picks, and then a couple of the other young upside swings they have. And then, of course, Tumani Kamara, one of the best defenders in the league. Got him in the trade for DeAndre Ayton as kind of a throw-in piece after Phoenix drafted him in the second round. Was really just an interesting move at the time because it seemed like it was a pretty good late-round pick for Phoenix. And then I think he's panned out to be significantly better than either team thought he would be, which is awesome. And he's going to get paid a lot. Right now, he's not getting paid very much. He's going to get paid a lot. Not too worried about that. And then as far as their future draft capital, they obviously have their own first this year. Starting, or I guess next year, it will be a lottery protected first, 2026, 2027, and 2028. If they're still in the lottery for all 3 years, then it'll turn into a 2028 second that will be traded to Chicago. Conveyed to Chicago is probably the better terminology. Basically, if Portland is able to make a leap and make it to the playoffs, they won't keep their first, which I'm sure they're fine with, because that means that a lot of these, or at least a couple of these young guys, have really taken a step forward. If this pick doesn't convey, then we have a lot of questions about how this team is going to move forward, because you have, first of all, guys that are too young to draw definitive conclusions on. And I think that's what makes this such an interesting time for them. Scoot Henderson's 20, Shaden Sharp's 21. You don't want to say, yeah, we give up on them. You can't do that. They're too young and have too much upside, and they were drafted as high upside young players. And Shaden Sharp's shown a good bit more than Scoot, even though Scoot has shown plenty of flashes. We just need more consistency from him, which we'll get into. But do they just continue to add lottery talent and then hope guys pan out? Do they package a couple of these guys for a more surefire player? What do you do here? I think you could also just show patience, and that's not something that any NBA fan of a team wants to hear. They want to hear, okay, here are the actionable things we can do so that our team can return to being a contender. Just saying, there probably isn't a move to make other than to try and nail your draft pick and maybe sign somebody to help in the locker room and like maybe you do what Detroit did last year and add a couple of veterans that fit in with the team and fill some needs and try and see if the young guys can take enough of a step forward to make the playoffs easier in the East, which is what Detroit did then in the West. And Portland already has some of those kind of guys. So really the development of this team comes down to either Scoot Henderson or Shaden Sharp developing into, or both, developing into close to like an all-star talent, or Denny Avdia continuing to develop, Donovan Clingan becoming a star center. This draft pick this year could also be big, obviously, if they leap up, but if not, what position do they go? They have young talent at basically every position. Do they draft with the mindset of, oh, we don't want to take a guy like Kamen Malawach because we just drafted Donovan Clingan? Do we want to not take a guy like Jeremiah Fears because we just drafted Scoot Henderson? Or do they feel like we'd rather, or we're not, I guess Scoot Henderson isn't good enough to keep them from drafting a point guard? Do they feel like that? I guess we'll see come draft night. Personally, I would rather just be patient with Scoot and Clingan and just draft best player available. If at that point it is like a Jeremiah Fears or something, then you may have a little bit more of a conversation about how that fits. Maybe it's not the worst thing to have both of them on the roster to push each other to be competitive. Positionless basketball is definitely more of a thing than in other sports. So those two may not be great fits next to each other on the court at the same time, but if you have 2 point guards that can push each other to become stars and then move one, like it's not a terrible thing. So I think just best player available is a pretty good strategy, but you could also go for a little bit more fit, but I don't know exactly what they'd be necessarily looking for. Because in theory, you have this lineup of Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Denny Avdia, Tumani Kamara, and Donovan Clingan as like a starting five. So pretty much anybody in this lottery, I think, could fit in as either a player that is better and overtakes one of those guys, or isn't as good but could be like a reserve, like a future reserve. I don't know. So it's gonna be interesting to see who they end up with in this draft. If especially maybe they leap up, that changes things. I think that maybe you say, I don't know how I feel about drafting Jeremiah Fears when we have Scoot Henderson, but maybe you don't say the same thing about Dylan Harper. It's like, okay, like Scoot has shown flashes through 2 years, but has he shown enough for us to say, yeah, we're not going to draft Dylan Harper? I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. So I think keeping an eye on the lottery will be huge, as it is for every single team. That's not something new I'm saying. But let's start off with talking about Scoot. I mean, he's definitely the most, I'd say, intriguing dynasty player or dynasty asset on this roster. Just it's hard to value him. Hard to say exactly what his value should be. Just looking at his numbers from this year, he averaged 12.7 points, 3 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1 steal, and 1.6 threes per game. Shot 41.9% from the floor, 76.7% from the line, turned it over 2.7 times. Just comparing that to the year before, the points and assists went down, as did the minutes slightly, but the field goal percentage went up. The shot attempts went down. The turnovers went down. It was just the usage went down. Like, it was just a lower volume role. It's kind of interesting. I think if I had Scoot on my roster, I would rather him play through the mistakes and have all the usage in the world than to kind of limit him. And that's just what the numbers reflect. That's not saying that's what they intended for like him to do, to like just completely dial it back. That's just what ended up happening, was lower usage, worse stats, but more efficient. But I think if this is going to work, excuse me, he's 21 now. I said he was 20 earlier. He's 21 now. If this is going to work, I think Scoot is going to be, I mean, the Russell Westbrook comp early on in his career, that was his favorite player as well. I don't think he has like that triple double upside, but I think kind of that, he's a freak athlete and you kind of just need to let him play through mistakes for this to work. Because when Russ was at his best, he basically had the ball the whole game and there were ugly plays and also 30-point triple doubles and incredible stat lines, fun dunks, amazing passes. And you dealt with him, you know, he had like the trademarked mid-range shot that maybe wasn't as high of a percentage shot as it seemed like it was at the time, but you let him do it because he was that good. And you probably are okay with Scoot Henderson, shooting whatever shot he wants because this is if it's going to work. You're okay with him maybe shooting extra threes because it makes the defense respect him, or it just kind of opens things up if he hits a couple of them because he did have some games where he hit multiple threes and it was a lot of fun to watch. He had the one game, yeah, he had 39 points and 8 threes. Like it can happen. He's not an atrocious shooter. He's just not. It's just not his strength. I definitely have questions, concerns. I think it would be kind of interesting to not be super concerned about him at this point. I was trying to find some numbers that maybe could give us a little bit of hope. And this is not a good stat or good comparison, but just kind of looking at his per possession assists, turnovers, steals, or points, assists, steals, and turnovers is probably the best way of putting it. At his age, only LeBron, Chris Paul, LaMelo Ball, and Brandon Jennings at their same age had like met the same qualifications for the per possession stats. Pretty good comp, but also if you look at it, Scoot Henderson's win shares during that season was a 1.8. LeBron was at 14.3, Chris Paul 10.4, LaMelo Ball 5.8, Brandon Jennings 4.2. So statistically, a few of those things were like they worked out okay, and like there's still some optimism there, but he just hasn't been as good. Like there's flashes, but he's not kind of just where we need him to be. He shot on shots less than 5 feet was shot 53% on 3.5 attempts from less than 5 feet. Among players that took at least 3 shots from inside 5 feet, only 7 players shot a worse percentage than Scoot. And I believe that's among 162 qualifiers. It's not it's not great. Among the players that shot kind of similar, Tyrese Maxey and DeJounte Murray were just barely ahead of him. Maxey was 55.6, DeJounte was 53.8. Trae Young, 51.5, and LaMelo Ball, 50.9 were both below him. This is abysmal, but another player on Scoot Henderson's team that shot 43.8% from less than 5 feet was Jeremy Grant. Yuck. Yeah, that's pretty bad, especially for a wing. Scoot Henderson, you're like, okay, like he's a guard. A lot of the guys I mentioned are guards, like Trae Young, LaMelo. The worst in the league was Trey Mann. I mean, Keon Johnson was right around there with Scoot Henderson, AJ Johnson. So like a lot of these guards, you're not expecting them to be perfect, but also like if Scoot Henderson is going to be what we think Scoot Henderson can be, he has to be better at the rim. Like that has to be a strength for him. He can't shoot this poorly at the rim and have this thing work. So we need him to improve in that regard. See him improve his finishing. I mean, he's athletic enough to do it. We just need to see it start actually happening. And again, he's still young, so it's not out of the question for this to happen. 55.3% the restricted area, a little bit better, as opposed to just a less than 5 foot qualifier. 37.5% from mid range. It's just we need to see improvements there next season, both at the rim, and then hopefully that opens things up to give him some easier shots. But also, I think we need to see him improve his jumper. So there's a lot of different things that he needs to work on, but he has a lot of potential there to still become this superstar point guard. It's still there, and he's young enough for it to happen. We just need to probably see a little bit more development out of him, just next season and beyond. We just hopefully next season's a nice, I guess, encouraging step for him. And a lot of times, I don't know if he'll play in summer league. I don't even remember if he played in last summer league, but I would assume not. So maybe it won't be. But if he does end up playing in summer league, we want to see third-year players absolutely dominate for 2 games and then get pulled out. Like, okay, you're too good to be here. So if he does play, that's what we're looking for. If he doesn't, hopefully it's because they feel so confident in him that they don't really need him to play. But he's definitely going to have, I don't know, a spotlight on him next season. I think if year 3 he hasn't taken any sort of statistical leap, we have to, I guess, have a little bit more of a reality check. Like, we can still believe in him and like believe, okay, like maybe he's just a very, very late bloomer, because it does take point guards a long time to learn, and some players learn at different speeds. So maybe he eventually figures it out. But I think if there is no year 3 breakout, then we get more concerned about what his upside can be. So hopefully Portland makes the necessary roster moves and lineup moves to like emphasize that, because I feel like it hasn't been fully emphasized, because they've been trying to do this like half competitive, half rebuild thing and just kind of put out a good lineup, but then tank sometimes towards the end of the year. I think if, again, I've probably said this multiple times, but like if teams did more like what Washington did this year and just say, hey, these guys are part of our future, we're going to play them a lot. Like, I don't see a reason why Scoot Henderson only started 10 games this past season. If you drafted him number 3 overall and still believe in him, you start him. I don't care if Anthony Simons is a better player right now. I'm not saying to bench Anthony Simons, but I'm saying you make sure that Scoot Henderson is in your starting lineup if you drafted him number 3 overall. I don't know. It's just weird to me. But we'll talk a little bit more about in a more positive light here, by talking about Denny Abdia, who had a phenomenal season this year. First one in Portland after spending the first couple of years with Washington. Averaged 16.9 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1 steal, 1.7 threes per game. Was definitely better down the stretch. Started off shooting the ball really poorly, like really poorly, and then kind of second half the year, second half, last 2 months, really took off. Just a stretch from March 10th to April 4th was this phenomenal stretch for him. Let's see. What can I quickly? Okay, so that was a 13-game stretch. And he averaged during that time 26.8 points, 11.2 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 1.2 steals, 3.2 threes, and shot 52% from the field. Turned it over 4 times a game as well. I think that it'll be interesting to see where he goes in drafts next year, because he started all year, or at least most of the year, I guess. Started off in the starting lineup, then was kind of off the bench for a little bit, and then became a starter again in late December, and then really took off second half of the year. I think it's kind of a combination of, okay, he got adjusted. It took him a little bit of time to get adjusted to a new city, a new team. And then once he got things figured out, then it worked out really well. And maybe he just continued to develop and just continue to get better. But it was also, okay, it was silly season at that point for a lot of teams. Portland was missing players. I mean, there was games in April that were being played, so we know Jeremy Grant wasn't available. I think the way he finished the year was very encouraging, but we also need to just be a little bit realistic. His value is probably very high right now in dynasty leagues. I think that he can be really, really good next year. He was 108 in 9-cat leagues on Basketball Monster this year, but that includes kind of a slow start. Still averaged some career highs, points, threes, assists, steals were career highs. Free throw percentage. I think he could be a top 50 guy next year. Could be. I wouldn't bank on it. I think top 100 is I feel good about that. Top 75. I think that's realistic. I think he has a lot of untapped potential here. Wasn't able to figure it out in Washington, but Portland seems a little bit more set on that, set on him figuring it out and him being part of the future. Very interested to see how he continues to develop. What can he be for a full season? Because some of these games kind of down the stretch of the year, I mean, 34-16-6, 27-15-5, 31-16-8, 36-8-7, 33-7-4-3, 32-15-10, 26-15-6, 2-2, 37-11-5. And that's like point rebounds, assists, steals, blocks if I went that far. Those are phenomenal numbers. Bunch of threes during that. He had at least 2 threes in every game during that, like I guess the final 13 games of the season. That nice stretch right there. I feel very good about Denny Avdia continuing to develop next season and being an important piece in Portland's future. Depending on the price, I'd be interested in trading for him in dynasty leagues. I think his value is high. Maybe you look to sell high because his value is really high right now. If you're in a league where somebody wasn't paying attention to his late run, then maybe you're able to get him for a fairly low price. I don't know. I think he's one of the players that among like I guess kind of the younger group here, which I mean, there isn't much of a difference between him and Anthony Simons, just a season or two. I feel very good about his development. The stretch that he showed, I guess kind of the step that he took late last year was very encouraging. He's also been in the league 2 years longer than Shaden Sharp and 3 years longer than Scoot Henderson. So maybe those jumps don't come for them this year, but I mean, there's a reason that Denny Avdia got traded. He still had upside, but he was top 10 pick and it didn't pan out as quickly as Washington was hoping. So they traded him. Maybe that's what happens with a guy like Scoot Henderson. Maybe he doesn't figure it out as quickly as we want him to. And Portland's like, okay, like we tried it. We don't feel good about it anymore. And that might be a couple years. Might not be this season. But it's just an interesting thing to, I guess, kind of keep an eye on. Like, how do things work with this timeline? If Portland wins the lottery, gets Cooper Flag, how does that impact everybody else's development? I think that's a question for every team that's in the lottery right now. If your team or if the team wins the lottery and adds Cooper Flag, how does that impact everyone else? Portland has an excess amount of former lottery picks and young talent that all of a sudden Cooper Flag is prioritized over. Tumani Kamara isn't getting bumped out of the rotation. He's one of the best defenders in the league. Denny Avdia was one of the best young players second half of last season and has shown a lot more than Shaden Sharp and Scoot Henderson have. And Cooper Flag doesn't directly impact Scoot Henderson's minutes, but could impact team direction. How much do they push to make this team more competitive because they have Cooper Flag now? Or how much do they say, okay, now we have our franchise player. Now we're going to make other moves to build this young core around him. And we're going to take a year or two and try and get more picks the next 2 years or young guys the next 2 years. But all of a sudden, you have a guy that could be an all-star within a couple seasons. I mean, I would say probably not year one, but I think but year two is very realistic. But year one's not impossible for Cooper Flag to be an all-star. So if all of a sudden you have him on this team, how does that impact everyone else? I think it's going to be interesting, and a lot of that we'll have our answer in a week. Maybe we need to cycle back through and talk about it after the lottery to see who gets impacted. It'll probably just end up being one of the teams at the top, and so it won't actually end up being that big of an impact here. But I think it's worth talking about at this point. All right, the other one of the other young guys that is still very intriguing is Shaden Sharp, who is still 21 years old, but is about to turn 22. We know that he is super athletic, can shoot the ball, Young guy, averaged 18.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, just under a steal, and 2 threes per game. I think the concern with Shaden Sharp is, does he follow that RJ Barrett mold in category leagues where he's not inefficient as a shooter, but it's not a strength for him. His field goal percentage is like below average. His free throw percentage is below average. Sure, he can do the point, rebounds, assists thing, and he can hit threes, but doesn't really give you any defensive stats. He's much better for points leagues. I think that's my concern was with Shaden Sharp in fantasy. I think just for Portland and their team, he can be a really good piece, especially if he continues to grow, continues to develop. I mean, shot creators that are as athletic as him don't grow on trees. I think there are a lot that, I guess, teams, when they draft players, are a lot of different guys that I think they think fit that mold, but Shaden Sharp does. Can we see him continue to develop as a playmaker? Maybe see the assists rise there and just get better as a scorer, just continue to improve in that regard. He is still young, so there is time. I think I'm just a little bit concerned for category fantasy leagues. And that's okay. Not everybody's game is built for fantasy basketball. I don't think that anybody grows up wanting to be a really good fantasy basketball player. So that's okay. Sometimes they're correlated just because the better players are able to do more in the box score, but not everybody's great at that. That's fine. Shaden Sharp, I think, is still an important part of Portland's future and has some upside. I think we just the hope is that he's so good offensively that the residual value of him just being on the floor more leads to 1.2 steals, maybe just a steal per game, maybe like 0.4, 0.5 blocks. Just like some little things to bump up there, and then improved efficiency. I think we just need to see him continue to develop. But I think the important thing to remember is that he hasn't, played a ton of basketball. He didn't play in college. Like, he had the year at Kentucky, but didn't play. Played 80 games as a rookie and then 32 games in year two, and then played 72 games this past year. So still just figuring things out. This past year was probably his first, because like year one, played 22.2 minutes per game. Just kind of like a small role. Year two, he played a larger role, but was only available for 32 games. And then this past year was a good sample, but he also had some big games down the stretch when he started off the year in the starting lineup, was kind of out of it for a little bit. Then like last few games of the year, he had a 33 and 10, he had a 36-7-5, and then a 37-7-5 with 6 threes. Like, those are great. So we'll be keeping an eye on Shaden Sharp, see how he continues to develop as a scorer, because I think that's probably the best path for him. It's not going to necessarily come in all of a sudden. Now he's much better defensively. I think it's just going to come in him being a better scorer and a more efficient scorer. All right, there's one other young guy that I definitely want to highlight and talk about coming off his rookie season. That's Donovan Clingan, who went number 7 in the draft out of UConn. Averaged 6.5 points, 7.9 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 1.6 blocks in 19.8 minutes per game. I mean, what we're seeing out of him, it was incredibly inconsistent as a rookie. Like, just looking at it, he did miss some time with some knee issues, but like, he had a 17 and 20 game with 3 blocks, and then followed that up with 6 points and 6 rebounds. Like, it just came very inconsistent during his rookie year. He had a 18 and 12 double-double against Cleveland, followed that up with 0 points and 3 rebounds. The idea of what Donovan Clingan can be, which is like this double-double threat, elite shot blocker, and a good passer he's not a floor spacer, but I guess it is enough of a 3-point threat that teams have to respect him a little bit, which opens things up on offense for the whole team. Maybe being like this offensive hub, which I know we talked about last week with Matt Lawson about centers that can be an offensive hub. I think Clingan fits that. And he's a very good paint protector. We just need to, I guess, one, I hope he can stay healthy because that was a little bit of an issue in year one and then was an issue in college. And then two, if he can just continue to grow in certain ways because some of the production was inconsistent. We know the block shots can be there pretty much every time, which is great. The rebounding dominance is always there's always the potential for that, but it didn't happen consistently. And then maybe just opening things up more on offense, getting a more dynamic skill set to where maybe he has a few extra post moves and ways to score down there, or can just hit the three a little bit more consistently, hit a few kind of down the stretch, showcase that a little bit more, developing pick and roll chemistry with Scoot Henderson. Like that just continues to grow. He has the upside here to be a really, really good player, both in real life and in fantasy, and kind of a dynamic big. But we need him on the floor, one. And two, I think the development of the other guys around him will help him be better. If Scoot Henderson develops into the point guard that we thought he could be when he was drafted, that makes things a lot easier on Donovan Clingan. All right, we'll hit on a few more guys. Mostly just for time's sake, we won't go too in depth. We talked about Anthony Simons. I think if he's in Portland again, great source of points, threes, assists. I would not be shocked if he was moved. I think it's probably the smart move for Portland at this point to move on from Anthony Simons, try and get back what you can. And which I'm not saying that like there isn't going to be much of a return. I think he can yield a pretty good return. I really think Orlando's a great fit. I think they need a guy like him, a guy like Simons as a shooter and shot creator, because they have enough defenders. So if Anthony Simons is having issues defensively, like they have guys behind him to help. I think that's a good fit. Keeping an eye on that this summer. Jeremy Grant, he's such an interesting case of a guy that when he's on the floor, he's productive enough, but he's not a guy that's very intriguing. Probably always going to be overdrafted. And he's not going to play second half of the season. I mean, I don't know, man. Hopefully, if he's still in Portland and Portland is competing for a play-in spot, he can end the drought, play in April. DeAndre Ayton, talented for fantasy, maybe not a center that you want to be your franchise center. So kind of interesting there. I think that's kind of the case in Dynasty. Like an issue we run into a lot is this player can be a really good fantasy like player in fantasy basketball, but he needs to be on the floor for that to happen. But he may not be as good for winning or doesn't fit a team as well, so that he's not on the floor. So even if the talent is good for fantasy, it's not good enough in real life for him to play enough for it to matter. It's an interesting case sometimes. I wouldn't even say that's super common around the league, but it does happen. Money Kamara, as we said, one of the best defenders in the league. The fantasy game is kind of interesting. Averaged, let's see, 11.3 points, 5.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.5 steals. I think the steal category is where he can really make his money in fantasy, but we also need to see him improve as a shooter. He averaged 1.7 threes this year, shot 37.5% from beyond the arc, which was improved, which was great to see. 45.8% from the floor, not great. Any improvements with his shooting efficiency would definitely be helpful, but he's going to make his money on defense. And then there's other guys that have upside on this team that are probably worth stashing in Dynasty. We mentioned Robert Williams at the beginning as probably a veteran piece that I guess you could call him a veteran. Still feels like a young guy because we haven't seen him on the floor much the last few years just because of the various injuries, but it's also like he's good when he's on the floor, but will he be on the floor? Too much of a risk. Other players on the team, Jabari Walker, Dwap Reith, Chris Murray, none of them are super exciting in fantasy. I think Ryan Repair, City Sissoko, those are like those young upside dart throws that may pan out. Probably don't feel so great about. I don't know. I think it's not a big summer for Portland just because I don't feel like that there are too many moves to make other than to truly hand the keys to the young core instead of trying to have them develop behind players. I wouldn't even say like great veteran examples. Like this is nothing against like because I mean, I'm just recording a podcast. I don't know how like about DeAndre Ayton's work ethic or Jeremy Grant's personality. Like this is not nothing about that. But I think just from like an outside perspective of you're having veterans that haven't really won anything trying to establish the culture for these young guys, and I just don't know if that's the best strategy. And we'll see if maybe they can get some veterans with championship experience to come in, and because like and DeAndre Ayton played the finals, but there was kind of like the narrative around him after that, which is why he got traded, and there was issues there. I don't know. I'm all for second chances, so maybe they're actually doing a really good job, and I just am not around to see it. Anyways, I think the main key for Portland is handing the young guys the keys and truly accepting that okay, these guys are our future, and we need to figure out whether or not these are going to be the guys to get us back to the postseason. That's a question they need to answer this summer. Um, and may the odds be ever in their favor for the draft lottery. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We'll be back next time, I believe, to discuss the Suns. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Suns next time. Not much to talk about from a dynasty perspective there, but we'll find some ways to have fun with that. If you want to, you can give me a follow on Twitter at NoRuben22. Subscribe, like, to the Old Man Squad Sports Network, and I will see you next time.